The Fallen One, Firelord, and Airwalker all released this week, and we're going to kick things off by covering their deck list that looked the most promising. We're going to cover potential breakout decks in general in the metagame, and then we're going to round things out with the generic top performers as well as most popular things at high infinite. Let's go ahead and get to it, shall we? Somewhat predictably, the Shuri Nimrod deck is looking to be the Fallen One's most elegant home. It fits really well here with the enablers this deck list is already playing, with Shuri into the Fallen One, unlocking 11 points of energy for you on the last turn of the game, and Symbiote Spider-Man into Fallen One, giving you a whopping 13 points. And then with either Magics, Limbo, or other location variants giving you different situations, you can even hit 20 plus in spots. This gives this archetype counterplay in spots that it previously didn't. Things like Black Panther into Arnim Zola are very vulnerable to tech cards, but when you have this giant glut of energy, you can Black Panther and Arnim Zola together on the last turn of the game, essentially letting you add 20 points to two different locations without your opponent being able to interact with it profitably under most circumstances. Another thing to keep in mind if you haven't played this archetype before is that if you Kid Omega your Shuri, this gives you a clean path to play Black Panther into double to then Arnim Zola it on that next turn, so that way you can have something even more massive for points on the board. The second archetype that's popped up with the Fallen One is Silver Surfer variations, using it in lieu of Sarah at the top end to allow you to play out extra cards at the end of the game. While there's no doubting that it's a little bit less consistent at letting you play out 3 drops in those final moments, the Fallen One does have the pretty large upside of not getting taken down by opposing copies of Mobius that can render Sarah's cost reduction null. One nice thing about this particular build is that you're not reaching to play cards that you wouldn't already want, with things like Captain Carter, Surge, Gwenpool, and Galacta all being Surfer staples for a long time that the Fallen One enjoys getting extra points of power and thus extra energy from. Firelord is a welcome addition to the Reanimator archetype that I've featured in these deck roundup videos before. He gives you some key redundancy in addition to Elixir and Phoenix Force as another way to bring back either a copy of Sage or Cassandra Nova and make them extra large, but he also provides more precision in what he's doing as well. Since Firelord is guaranteed to bring back only 3 energy cards, it means that you can blow up extra things in the same path as a Cassandra Nova or a Sage, which is especially beneficial in Sage's case since you only want to be playing her into fuller lanes so you can max out her initial power to begin with, and then Firelord can bring her back really cleanly. I like the innovation of Arnim Zola at the top end of this Reanimator deck list, since you can be reanimating a giant Venom as well, that Arnim Zola can then double up by splitting across the board. I do want to put an asterisk next to this Airwalker deck this week, because while the card technically released with high voltage, only massive whales who also had a ton of time to grind through the missions they were buying with extra gold have access to the cards. The sample size on this one is even smaller than a new card typically is. That being said, I think it is an excellent fit to be playing with Morgan Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay is an effect that's felt pretty powerful in the past, bringing back all your discarded and destroyed cards with +3 power, but you have to build your deck around her, and then the games where she doesn't show up, you kind of feel high and dry. In enter Airwalker, who when destroyed gets a 4 energy card out of your deck directly into play. This synergizes with the destroy synergies that Morgan already has, while giving you extra access to her more frequently. Many Lockjaw enjoyers, myself included, have longed to try and find a deck list for this card since it fell out of favor long ago. And this particular build is one of the best performers we've had since they reworked Lockjaw to the 2 energy activate that it is today. You have so many different ways to cheat bigger things into play, whether it's Lockjaw or accelerating energy from Electro and Luna Snow, or blinking or Jubilee. And then you have Misery kind of tying the room together, allowing you to reactivate some of these powerful on reveal effects as well. I really like how Merlin really pulls the whole room together as well, with his ability to sub out Jubilee, White Tigers, and Hood small bodies for either extra energy or polymorphing them up into something bigger, having a lot of potential as well. Agatha Harkness variations have been nipping around the fringes of the format for a little while, especially in tandem with this Fenris Wolf Negasonic Teenage Warhead Moon Knight package that allows you to be disruptive and get extra points from your opponent. And Redshift is a recent addition to the game from the start of the season that adds even more consistency. Since discarding the leftmost card in your hand, it's guaranteed to tag Agatha Harkness, who is always in that spot, allowing you to get her into the discard pile, but more importantly, make sure you take over control of your game before you bring back her 14 points worth of power with Ghost Rider, or drop a fat Black Knight blade into play with her stats. The Mad Titan is one of the few cards in Marvel Snap that's had more reworks and text box changes than Mantis, but it really feels like Second Enter finally got Thanos into a decent spot. This Destroy variation popped up in the untapped metrics, and it seems like a really good mix of both proactive ways to get value out of blowing up your own stuff to make things like Death cheaper, as well as enable Firehair, while also having a lot of the busted reactive cards that you want in Snap to be potent. We've got Killmonger, Shang-Chi, and Lady Deathstrike for synergies as well as disruption. And then we've got Rogue and Iceman as extra tech cards thrown in to be able to give your opponent a run for their money, regardless of what they may be playing. Pouring over the untapped data for the most competitive slices, like I often do for this high potential category, it appears news of movement deaths in the wake of Mercury perhaps was exaggerated. This classic Heimdall movement deck list has some impressive stats featuring those typical tech cards that we see them play. Cosmo and Goliath really work double duty inside of this core, not only breaking up opposing combo decks like Black Panther, Arnim, Zola, and Wong, but also more importantly, protecting your big stat lines from your opponent looking to blow them away with things like Shadow King or Shang-Chi. It's nice to see that the swap from Vulture to Human Torch doesn't appear to be slowing this archetype down with the recent move rework on our last OTA. Bounce Move in a classical variation is also trucking along per the metrics on Untapped. The one big change from looking at the few different people that are playing this is with Human Torch now being a 3 energy card. It looks like the most successful builds are no longer playing Falcon, focusing instead on Toxin and Beast, so you can be doubling up your double up move payoff more consistently. Our final mover and shaker and last one in the high potential category this week is Redwing Move. I almost wonder if I should take this deck list and move it into the top performers at this point. While the sample size in this particular data slice is not that large, variations of this archetype have been popping up with some consistency for a little while now, with a glut of different 6 energy bombs at the top of your curve, with both Dracula to take advantage of their stats and Redwing to drop them back into play. I also think Zorn is a standout worth mentioning here. Not only is this card obviously a key enabler from Redwing, moving 3 and 4s away from its location, but it'll also be pretty disruptive to your opponent, locking them out of being able to play key cards in his spot. Cerebro 2 honestly feels like one of the quiet killers in this format as we move into the top performing decks for the most competitive data slices on Untapped. This archetype can just put out really impressive numbers of stats, and Cerebro now gives +3 for its bonus. When you combine this with Mystique, it means you can very easily get 32 points worth of power into a single lane. You combine this with the fact that cards like Goose, Storm, and even Echo give you a lot of control over what your opponent is able to play where, and then you add in consideration for the fact that Cerebro's buffs allow you to get stats into locations other decks would typically be locked out of. It gives you a lot of unpredictability and control over how the games tend to play out. As I called out last week, we have a second round of data supporting the end of turn deck is still quite powerful despite it getting a number of nerfs. I actually made a point to play this deck on my live stream this week because I wanted to get a feel for Mr. Fantastic first steps before our recent Series 4-5 tier list update. And I have to say, while he's not the standout amazing card that he once was, he still feels playable and reasonable inside of this shell. Dropping a 3 energy card down to a 2 is quite good, letting you play 2 3s in the 5th turn of the game, which often gives you valuable tempo that this archetype really can take advantage of. One of the big draws to this particular deck list that's good at putting stats out across the board while being incredibly resilient to opponents disrupting you. If you're someone that's fed up of playing against break all your stuff deck, this archetype is an excellent counter to it in my experience. Our next top performer is a more classical clog variation, leveraging some of the latest metagame powerhouse innovations and our latest season pass card. You've got Mercury Cannonball, but because this deck list is Debring and Vipering, Cannonball's pretty good even when Mercury is nowhere to be found. Galactus First Steps is taking over Red Hulk's spot as the 6-drop of choice in this deck, which I would wager is partially due to the fact that you can fully lock out your opponent in one spot and get those guaranteed Herald triggers there every single turn, allowing him to get quite massive fairly consistently. Our last top performer for another week in a row is this Victoria Hand Moon Girl Misery Shell, which I'd like to call it is featuring Quake as a tech card. This deck list has a good mix of both proactive stats, cards like Quake that can blow your opponent out in key spots, as well as Shadow King to kick over the occasional Sandcastle, giving you a lot of accesses of attack in your many matchups. The 3 decks in our most popular category this week don't have bad metrics per se, but their performance is also markedly worse than the other top performers and smaller sample size high potential deck lists that I covered in the video before this. The most popular deck, to the surprise of no one who's been playing Marvel Snap lately, is this pretty toxic Wiccan Cannonball break all your stuff deck that I've talked about in a few of the other descriptions. Fenris Wolf is bringing back whatever you're breaking with Warhead, Shang-Chi, or Cannonball, and then Galactus First Steps benefits from the fact that Quicksilver gets on the board early and often, and then is frequently backed up by a 2-3, allowing him to regularly hit 16 to 20 points of power in most games that you play him out in. Second most popular deck, you guessed it, also a break your stuff focused pile of cards. This one leveraging Death and Killmonger as additional ways to break things and get paid off for doing so. Finally, it's probably not a coincidence that the third most popular deck in Infinite right now is this Agatha Hela amalgamation. While obviously Fenris Wolf can take advantage of the fact that you're discarding cards a little bit, they were going to be able to do that anyways, and this deck list tends to be very resilient to your opponent Shang-Chiing you since your stats aren't coming down to the very last turn of the game, and this deck list has a ton of cards that make things like Gladiator incredibly embarrassing, either by having strong on reveal effects that you want access to consistently, or by having major stat lines that Gladiator is going to leave on the board unable to destroy. Marvel Snap is continuing to chug along between its OTA, balance passes, and regular card releases. It feels like we got a pretty steady flow of content that's kept me pretty engaged. If you want to see a lot of different decks in action, past roundup videos like this one, be sure to check the link in the video description down below, where I post a deck highlight 7 days a week with something different in Marvel Snap. Also consider dropping by my live stream at YouTube or twitch.tv/Jeff Hogan, where you find me streaming Marvel Snap 5 days a week, typically. If you enjoyed my roundup today, make sure you smash the like button. If you happen to be new here and want more videos like this in the future, tap that subscribe. I appreciate everybody that made it all the way through to the end, and I hope your next snap pack is an excellent one.